Hello class, happy week 6. We just make it through this week. We are officially halfway done, and then we have our official midterm exam. Anyway, okay, so this is kind of a big week. I like to think if it's an easier week. I keep saying that because we're talking about confidence intervals. Basically, confidence intervals, you can calculate them for a variety of statistics. You can calculate a confidence interval for a proportion, a confidence interval for a mean, and basically what that is saying is a confidence interval is basically a point estimate from your given sample data of the population. Okay, so depending on what the what the statistic is, whether it's a mean, it's a point estimate of the population mean. If it's a proportion, it's a point estimate of the population proportion. So, with that said, a couple things you need to know. You'll see words thrown around this week in the reading and then on the homework that talks about these things called tails, okay, and that's talking about the ends of a distribution, okay, so there's a left tail and a right tail. The easiest way to think about this in my mind, we'll talk about things like one-tailed tests and two-tailed tests, okay? Typically, obviously a two-tailed test is talking about the left side and the right side. A one-tailed test could either be left or right, and it really that's speaking to your hypothesis or research question. If you're interested in knowing if a particular value or statistic is below the mean or the population proportion, it's going to be left. So low, L, left. If it's above, it's going to be R or right. So that's the easiest way to think about that. Degrees of freedom shouldn't be a new topic, but in terms of the confidence interval formula, it's always n minus 1. So the sample size minus 1. So if the sample size is 20, your degrees of freedom are going to be 19. Easy peasy. All right. The homework is actually a little bigger than normal. There's 16 questions, 10 of which require some sort of calculation. So the good news is for you is I sent out a homework assistance file again that kind of breaks down the function syntax, because we're going to be getting into T and Z distributions this week, and Excel is nice because there's functions built in where if you use those functions, you just plug in what your probabilities are and your sample size depending on what it's asking, and poof, like magic, you get the answer to your question. So you have those. There's a couple calculators I put in there too for the confidence interval for proportion and the mean, just so you can see the breakdown, because the breakdown of the confidence interval formula, everything revolves around the standard error, which is really as a function of the standard deviation and sample size. So I really like how if you click through the various parts of the confidence interval calculators, you can see where the margin of error comes from, where the standard error comes from, so on and so forth. So it should make your life significantly easier this week. And so the last thing that people get hung up on is interpreting a confidence interval. They like to think of confidence. They see the word confidence, they'll say, oh, well, if I set an alpha level of 95% or 90% or 99%, you would think, well, I'm 95% confident for whatever the result is. And that's not how that's interpreted. Basically, the correct way to interpret a confidence interval is if there was a whole bunch of repeated samples, if whatever your investigation is, you were to do it over and over and over again, 95%, if we're using that as an example, 95% of those intervals would contain the population statistic, whether it's the mean or the proportion. Okay, so it's not that you're 95% confident. You're 95. If 95% of the intervals were occur over and over again, your number is going to be in between those. So that's what that means. So it really doesn't get addressed in this particular homework, but I'm just kind of giving you a heads up because you'll see it later on. Okay, so that's it. We have the midterm exam. Again, that's going to be more questions, and you only get one attempt on that. But I think you guys will be in good shape for that no matter what. And again, regarding the critical article review assignment, the offer is do nothing, get an 82. Do the assignment, upload it to the assignment folder. I will grade it. You can either do better than a grade, greater and better. You can get greater than an 82, or obviously you could do worse. So the choice is yours. I think the 82 is a fair deal. Okay, so that's it for week 6. If you have any questions, just email me.